So good morning, everybody. My name is Anne White, and I'm Head of International Trade at Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. The Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce is the accredited chamber for Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire, Heathrow and Swindon. Today's webinar is focused on EU exit export documentation. This is the second update that we've done on export documentation, the first being prior to the 1st of January. So obviously things have moved on, more questions have been answered since then. So the purpose of today is to give you an update on some of the stuff that we've already released. So I'd like to say that today's webinar is actually being delivered as part of a new collaboration between Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership and Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce and the Thames Valley Berkshire Growth Hub, which we are delivering a new programme of information advice to assist Berkshire businesses to understand and adjust to the changes of EU exit. So this is the first webinar we'll be running in that series, and we have another one on the implications of VAT in relation to trade, which is on the 11th of February. So if you're interested in that, please click onto the website and register. So today's webinar, as we all know, it's important in relation to documentation to make sure that you are up to date with everything that's been happening and realise that some of the changes, which in some cases is vast, have come in since EU exit. So today I'm going to look at some of the main documentation that we use. We're going to look at non-preferential trade, and we're also going to look at preferential trade, and also some information on temporary exports in relation to 88 Carnes. I thank everybody for sending through questions. I will remind everyone also that this webinar today is being recorded, so it will be available at a later date for you to view again at your leisure. I have tried to put as much information as possible on the slides, so they're a bit busy, but the information is there to assist you. So they'll also be sent out to you afterwards. So thank you for joining, and I'm just going to turn my camera off, which gives me a bit more time so you can view everything. So thank you for joining, and without further ado, I'm going to go into the presentation. So non-preferential origin. With regards to non-preferential origin, this is the rules that relate to anywhere else, that any trade that is not relative to a trade agreement. So that is trade conducted under the most favoured nation status. The rules of origin relating to non-preference have not changed. There has been no change in regards to the UK leaving the EU in relation to non-preference. They are rules that are used worldwide, and the rules of origin are determined by wholly produced products or those products that have had a last substantial economic justified process or working that's taken place on them. With regards to non-preferential origin and non-preference trade under the most favoured nation, mainly used are certificates of origin. They are trade facilitation document. They're not always mandatory. And I know we have had a lot of questions from some overseas importers have requested that the exporters do supply certificates of origin. That is fine, but in a lot of cases, it is not a mandatory requirement by the customs authority. So just bear that in mind. And also the certificate of origin as we know it, a UK certificate of origin, is not used for preference. So please be aware of that. So they're required for a number of reasons. Regulatory requirements. Some countries do like to see them. They may have embargoes on certain origin of goods. Commercial requirements. The goods maybe your importer may be then looking to sell the goods on, so they may want to know the origin of the goods. And financial requirements. So there may be a need for a certificate of origin under a letter of credit. When it comes to certificates of origin and pre-UK, the 1st of January, we used to use EU certificates of origin. We now have a new United Kingdom certificate of origin, which came into force on the 1st of January. And we can now no longer issue EC certificates of origin. So please beware, if you do hold stock of those, please send them into the chamber for them to be swapped. There have been a few changes in relation to the UK Certificate of Origin. The consignor box, we used to accept EU multinational addresses in the consignor box on their own. Obviously, we're not a member of the EU anymore, so we cannot do that. And the origin box, box 3, we cannot accept European Community in that box. It used to be okay to add European Community instead of putting all of the independent country names in. Cannot accept that. You would need to list all of the countries. If the goods are of United Kingdom origin, you just state United Kingdom. If the goods are of other EU country origin, you have to state the actual countries themselves. So no longer can they use European Community in that box. Origin declarations, so nothing's changed in regard to origin declarations on non-preference. So that's the most favoured nation trading. And we will still require evidence for foreign origin goods. So that's anything that is not UK origin goods. We still require foreign backup supporting evidence. Export documentation is huge, and if we cover every single document in relation to exporting on this webinar, it would be much longer than an hour. So I will say that if you have any questions related to other documents we may not cover today, or any questions related to it, please send them through to us and we will answer those. So UK Certificate of Origin, can we amend an EC Certificate of Origin that's been issued in 2020? We can. You can send that in, and we can actually still make amendments, but we cannot issue new ones at all, but we can make amendments. If you have a letter of credit or a contract that still asks for a EC Certificate of Origin, that is going to be a problem because we cannot issue that. So hopefully the letter of credit would just say Certificate of Origin, and that wouldn't be an issue. If an EC Certificate of Origin is lost, spoilt or destroyed, we would have to what we call do a replacement, which would be a UK Certificate of Origin. And as I said before, if you have any blank stock of EC certificates that you hold within your organisations, please ask your chamber, whether it be Thames Valley or any other chamber, if you can swap those. If you have a Certificate of Origin that's being legalised at the embassy and not yet released, that is happening now. Some of the embassies are very slow on releasing documents due to COVID of staff shortages. Officially, if the certificate has been raised and the goods have left before 11 p.m. on the 31st, then it shouldn't be an issue. But we have had some instances where EC certificates have been pulled up by overseas customs. So please contact us if that is the case, and we'll give you advice and guidance. We've had some questions about Arab British certificates of origin. These have not changed at all. The processes are still the same. They are still used for the Arab League member states, where, especially if you need something legalised or someone's requiring that specifically. So Arab British certificates of origin have not changed. The rules haven't changed. Everything is still the same in relation to that. And we are an agent at Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. So if you ask for an Arab British Certificate of Origin, give us a call. So with our electronic portals for submission of documents, please make sure that if you are using what we call the Express or the DIY service, that you are not using an EC application, because that will specifically be rejected, because the overseas customs now will know that if it's been issued after the 31st, it is not viable. So trade preference and UK trade agreements. So we met at the chamber here. We've had hundreds of inquiries from companies in relation to trade preference. This is a significant part of what has changed since we left the EU. And the issue we have is that not all trade agreements are the same. They don't work by the same rules. So we have left the EU now officially after a few false dawns, and we now have the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement in place. I have put a link, so when you get the presentation, I will be able to link through to that. it is causing some difficulties for some companies because there are very stringent stipulations on that and what qualifies for preference and what doesn't. So when we refer to qualifying goods qualifying for preference, it's now very different, and you need to understand the rules of origin relating to the EU trade agreement. Also, I have put there a list to the non-EU trade agreements that the UK have signed, and it's over 60 trade agreements. And I will say they are not the same, as I mentioned before. They don't have uniformity, and that is a common thing that organisations, we're used to uniformity with the EU agreements. In the main, they were virtually the same, but every UK trade agreement may have different rules on origin, different rules on claiming preference, different rules on how your goods qualify, and different rules more on accumulation. So it's important for businesses to make sure when they're sending goods to a specific country and they're trying to claim preference, that they check that their goods do qualify. This is the one area that is causing a lot of queries, a lot of soul searching for companies, because it's not as simple as a lot of people thought it would be, even though there's an EU trade agreement. So as I said, there's a number have been signed now, and there's a list available I've put on there for you. So you see some really, countries that we do a lot of trading with: Israel, Turkey, Switzerland, and as I said, South Korea. More and more countries are coming on board, but please remember, one fundamental thing to take away today is the trade agreements are not all the same. If you're sending something to Ukraine, the rules may possibly be very different to if you're sending goods to Turkey. To claim preference, the origin rules, you must check on the individual agreements. And they can be very difficult to interpret, but we're here to help. And we will be, over the next few weeks, doing a webinar relating to specific preference and rules of origin, because we've had so many queries on this. It's something that obviously people out there need a bit more guidance on. So there's also some other countries which we have a trade agreement, but at the moment it's not fully ratified and there are specific points. So Canada, if you're trading with Canada, trade preference, we have an agreement which comes into effect early in 2020 this year. However, at the moment, preferential tariffs are now being applied, even though it's not been ratified. Jordan, that comes into effect early 2021, not yet. I think it's March. At the moment, any shipments unless they've been taken under preference, imports coming in under preference, but if your UK exports, it's going to be the WTO most favoured nation rules. So there's no preference as yet for Jordan until that actually comes in. And Mexico, that hasn't been fully ratified. However, at the moment, you can claim preference on that. So there's been a letter of exchange which allows companies to claim preference for Mexico if their goods do actually apply. So these are the list of countries also where at the moment agreements are under discussion. So Albania, WTO rules as we go down. So you'll be able to look at that at your own leisure, because some imports are under general system of preference, and for others it relates to World Trade Organization rules. So there is that bit of crossover. Not everything was agreed and signed before the 31st of December. I mentioned before, the important thing of these trade agreements that we have is that they are not uniform. You need to check in relation to each one what you need to do to see if your goods qualify and how you declare preference. They do not have a uniform way of claiming preference either. So some may use an EUR1 preference document, some may use an invoice declaration. The rules of origin, I can't emphasize enough, they are not the same. And the one that's causing a lot of problems is accumulation. If we look at the UK-EU trade agreement, it states in the agreement that materials coming from the EU being used in the UK, as long as they're being processed above a minimum requirement, the goods will qualify for preference as UK origin. It does not mean that goods just coming into the UK from the EU of EU origin qualify. There has to be some sort of process which is more than a minimum process for those goods to qualify. This is a topic in itself, as I mentioned, so we will cover that on a future webinar. But if you need help in the meantime, please contact us, because that's what we're here to do. All of the trade agreements are available on the .gov.uk website. Check the guidance. There's some really good guidance notices on there. We call them the trading with. So trading with Turkey, trading with Mexico, because it gives out a bit more succinct information on the rules of origin accumulation. Another question we've been asked a lot is regards to if we have a trade agreement with Turkey and we also have a trade agreement with the EU, does that mean goods can come to the UK and then straight to the EU? And is there diagonal accumulation, in other words? The answer is no. So you have to check all the trade, because a lot of them do not cover diagonal accumulation. So that's why it's very important to have a look. So claiming preference on exports. As we said, it is stipulated in each agreement, your goods must meet the qualifying rules and you must check the accumulation rules. An EUR1 is still used for a large number of the agreements, and it is now a UK EUR1 document. But others, such as the UK EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement and Turkey, use invoice declarations. So that's why it is very different. So you need to check, and it is not the same wording as we were used to on the previous invoice declarations that you would have used if you're an approved exporter. I'm going to quickly go into a little bit about more detail about EUR1s. When you're applying for an EUR1 movement certificate, UK EUR1 movement certificate, first of all, there must be a trade agreement with the EU for that destination country. We are being asked to authenticate EUR1s for countries where there is no trade agreement. The UK has no trade agreement. Please check. As I said, the UK has not signed trade agreements with every country that we had previously when we were in the EU. The goods must meet the preferential origin rule relating to that particular country, and the goods must meet the direct transportation or non-manipulation rule. What that means is, for example, if you were sending something to Mexico under preference, you cannot import them into the US and then export them to Mexico. They must go straight to Mexico the only thing that can happen is en route. If they need to stop for some reason, maybe they're changing from one vessel to another, there must be no manipulation of that cargo. That cargo must stay as is. Otherwise, you cannot claim preference. And something else to note, and this is very important because it is also confusing people, when they refer in a lot of the agreements to a certificate of origin being used as a preference claim, this is not a UK certificate of origin, so it's not the non-preference certificate of origin, it is actually a UK EUR1 movement certificate. Some of the customs terminology, certificate of origin is used in the same instance, but it does confuse exporters sometimes. So that's important to remember. It's not a certificate of origin, it is the EUR1 movement certificate. So, as I mentioned before, EU EUR1s and ATR documents no longer used for exports from the UK. We cannot issue EU ATR documents for Turkey. They do not exist as far as UK exporters are concerned as now. If you have an issued EUR1 document or an ATR issued, we can issue, and it's lost or destroyed, we can issue a duplicate, and we will issue you a duplicate EUR1 or ATR, which are EU documents. We have that authority to do that. But of course they will be backdated. We cannot issue EC, EUR1s or ATRs now. And our electronic platform will actually now only give you the opportunity to raise an ATR as a duplicate. In regards to certain preference, some companies were also used to using the REX system, which is actually an EU system as a sort of register of trusted exporters, traders. We now no longer are part of the REX system in the UK. It's a European registration system, hence we can no longer be part of the REX system. You may be asked, however, by some companies put a REX declaration on a invoice declaration for some of the new preference agreements, but the UK does not use those. So preference claims used by invoice declaration. So there's a few countries, the main one obviously being the European Union. So anyone that's trying to claim preference on a European Union shipment going out to the European Union would need to use an invoice declaration. In the main, they're normally on the invoice, but they can be on a separate document. But there is specific wording. It's not, it's not general wording, it's specific wording. So you must check, as I said before, in regards to the information that's required on that invoice declaration. In some cases, it is very similar, but there is a difference. So European Union, Japan, Singapore. With Singapore, you must be an approved exporter if the value of the invoice is over €6,000. So I think it's £5,700 sterling. So you must still be an approved export. Turkey, so as I said before, no ATR documents. Some importers still ask for a certificate of origin, a UK certificate of origin. That's fine. If they want that, we can issue that. But we cannot issue ATR documents. You must be using the invoice declaration for Turkey to claim preference. And we know there have been instances when some of the customs authorities in Turkey may not have been up to speed with that and so have asked for an ATR, or some of the import agents. So please remind them that the trade agreement stipulates that it is invoice declarations only. And South Korea, you still have to be an approved exporter unless the goods the shipment is under £5,700 sterling. So this is an example of the origin claim by invoice declaration. This is the one particularly for the UK-EU trade agreement. And as you can say, it's quite simple to fill in. Where it says exporter reference number, this is where the confusion has led in regards to the use of a REX registration. In the EU, the exporters will insert a REX registration. So the traders are used to seeing a REX registration. However, we don't have that system. We don't use that system. We're no longer part of it, as I mentioned. So you have to use your EORI number. So you must insert your EORI number into that declaration. And if you do not, then that declaration will not be accepted for preference. And the other thing which obviously which stares out is point 3 in red, preferential origin. So this is where you insert, and on the instructions it says UK or EU. But of course, any goods coming out of the UK must be of UK origin. So EU goods, unless they've been manufactured or manipulated or processed in the UK, are not viable for preference. So if they were just imported into the UK, stored into the UK from, say, Italy, stored in the UK, and then re-exported, they are not subject to preference under the rules of the preferential trade agreement. There may be other methods that could be used for claiming not having to pay duty, but in regards to preference, unless there has been a process undertaken in the UK to EU origin goods, which is over and above the minimum requirements of processing, which they do stipulate in the agreement, then they cannot claim preference. Hence, those goods will have to be imported back into the EU with duty and taxes liable. And this is the thing that people like Marks and Spencer's, we've all may have seen the Percy Pig issue, which has been reported in the press. This is because the goods are coming in, but they're not being processed at all in the UK. So when they're being re-exported to the EU, they are being asked to pay duty and taxes. And obviously the final thing is obviously you must date and sign this declaration, which in a lot of cases will be on the invoice, so that's not a problem. So I know we're going to have lots of questions. So the final document I'm going to go to in a bit more detail is temporary shipments using an ATA Carne. So ATA Carne is utilised for temporary shipments used in a commercial capacity. So that might be tools of the trade for commercial works being done, equipment, testing, evaluation, exhibitions, trade fairs, commercial samples, or sports and cultural events. And I know we have quite a bit. Olympics are still scheduled at the moment, so we have quite a lot going out for the Olympics, so they use Carnes. If you utilise a temporary shipment on an ATA Carne, the goods that go out must all come back. It is not used for anything that is consumed or that does not return. So whether it be flyers, whether it be petrol, fuel, etc., it can only be used that goods come back. And with regards to the ATA Carne scheme for temporary exports, the EU is now treated, because we are a third country, as one temporary export block. So if you're going to Italy, France, and Spain, you will have you can have one visit for that. So it's one country. So if it's all in one tour, say you go on an exhibition, you're going to various countries. If you go once, that'll be one visit, and you can visit those countries. So one destination, one single rate of security. With an ATA Carne, you have to either lay down a guarantee based on the goods and the rate, what the percentage is with regards to the goods not actually coming back. So there's different rates for different countries. You have to pay either a guarantee based on that rate, and which you get back once the goods have come, or you can take out what we call an indemnity insurance, which you take out an insurance which you guarantee that the goods are coming back. And then if the goods are sold or something happens to those goods, then obviously there's a claim against that insurance. But so the EU is classed as one block, one destination, and it has a single rate for all goods of 40%, which is quite high, but that's what it has been set at. So if you're traveling through the EU to reach a destination, so say you're traveling through the EU to reach Turkey and you're wanting an ATA Carne, you have to have transit vouchers. It's just like if your goods are traveling through the EU by road to a destination on a permanent export, you have to have a transit document. You have to have a transit document to transit through the EU without having paying duty. And we know transit documents in relation to road freight in particular is causing a lot of problems, because maybe people aren't prepared, the hauliers, people aren't prepared, and they haven't got transit documents for their exports. So that's in relation to permanent exports. So that is a transit document on transiting through the EU on a permanent export is what they call a T1 document, and that is causing a lot of problems. So if you have specific inquiries about transit in the EU in relation to permanent exports, you need to speak to the haulier, because they are or the freight forwarder, because they are a document that is the responsibility of the haulier, and also it's not something we offer as a chamber. So please do contact the haulier for more information on that if there's a problem, because we know there have been a lot of problems with transit. But in relation to transit for a temporary shipment using an ATA Carne, you will get a transit vouchers to transit through Europe and then to come back. If you have a Carne, these Carnes last for a year. If you have a Carne, you can do multiple visits to multiple places under a Carne, as long as they're in the Carne scheme. If you have a Carne which is already been issued, and you want to add Europe to a destination, you can do that. You have to request extra, or you want to transit through Europe to the destination, you have to request extra transit vouchers. So you go back to the Chamber of Commerce that issued it, like ourselves, and you say, well, now we've got to go through Europe. The Carne was issued in, say, November. We have to travel through Europe. So now we need extra transit vouchers, and that can be arranged for you. So there's been a lot of questions about how you get ATA Carnes endorsed. How that works, if you're taking something out on an ATA Carne, they have to be stamped in and stamped out at the port of entry and exit. So there are some particular guidances available for goods that are going in, coming out, being driven, because that's a lot of the issues that seem to be happening at the moment are in relation to goods that are going by road. So there's just, I've listed those for people that do use Carnes. There's particular requirements in relation to, say, Eurostar. You have to register in advance that you're going to be using a Carne, and they will then tell you the process. So I've just put those down for reference. And then also Northern Ireland, you cannot have a Carne for Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland, as we know, they're in that sort of stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea, because ultimately they're still in the customs union, but they're part of the United Kingdom. So Northern Ireland, there's been many questions in relation to trading with Northern Ireland, and it is a very big topic, so it's not one to be covered today. And also, if you're sending goods to the Republic of Ireland, there are again very, very specific requirements. So I'm just going to go back. I just wanted to mention a bit about some other, for the export process. So if you are, as of today, sending goods to the EU, and it's a permanent export, and you would obviously need to find out what the requirements are for additional documentation that you may not, which you wouldn't have had to send before. Before, obviously, it was classed as a dispatch, the same as sending the goods from the Thames Valley from Slough to Birmingham, say. So all that is needed would be an invoice and a transport document, which obviously your haulier would do for you. But now there are lots of other requirements in regards to exporting to the EU. And it's exactly the same as exporting to any other non-EU country. The requirements are the same, but they may have specific stipulations in regards to your types of products that you're sending. So the first thing you would need to do if you're exporting something to the EU is to know your commodity code. Without your commodity code, then you're not going to get a definitive answer as to what kind of other documentation will require. There's general documentation, but there may be specific documentation for your goods, such as animal products, food products, various products which may have dual use, which could be used for another purpose. There's a number of hazardous products. There's a number of other requirements depending on specific goods. So your commodity code, if you do not know your commodity code, you would need to actually find out what your commodity code is. You need to know your commodity code. If you're exporting to the EU as well, you need to also know what terms your sales contracts are, because it may be that you're not responsible under the terms of sale. We call them Incoterms. They are called Incoterms, international sales terms. It may mean that you're not responsible for actually doing all of the paperwork relating to that. It may be the importer's responsibility. Anything of these questions, if you're not sure, contact the chamber because we can help you. If it's a permanent export, then the minimum you're going to need, as well as an invoice, and it's not going under preference, you will definitely require an export declaration. So the goods will not leave the country, will not be prepared to leave the country without the export declaration. You will also need other transport documents required for those goods, and they will be available for your transport, for your freight forwarder, whether it be the airway bill, the bill of lading. We mentioned transit documents, T1 transit documents, if you're transiting Europe, for example, to another destination. So there are numerous other documents that may be required, but they all draw down from your commodity code and the country you are going to. So my advice to you is, if you are not sure, then you contact an organization like ourselves and whoever else you may be in touch with that can assist you for that, because ultimately it is not the same now as trading with sending goods to Birmingham. It is the same as sending goods elsewhere around the world. And as we said, if they have a trade agreement, there is additional things that you have to check before your goods you can deem your goods qualify. In relation to the trade agreements and the documentation, if in order for your goods to qualify as well, you're also obliged to keep supporting documents in relation to that actually do stipulate if your goods qualify. Because if there is a request for HMRC to do some investigation on whether your goods qualify or not, they will be looking to see how you have calculated or how you've looked to see if your goods qualified for the preference rule. I will actually say to you, and in a lot of cases, that may be a long-term supplier declaration, which your suppliers need to provide to you. The UK have put an easement in place, and initially for the first year, you're not obliged to have that straight away. So you have a year to make sure you're getting all the supporting evidence that you need to determine your origin, your preferential origin claim. So that's something to think about, but it's also something to think, you know, don't leave it to the end of the year just in case there is a query. But we have heard there have been instances at the moment, as we said before, in regards to preference, where some countries in the EU are asking for specific things which really shouldn't be required, or there's confusion. There's confusion regarding the REX number. There's confusion regarding the requirements, say with Turkey, they want an ATR, but there's no ATR document allowed now. So it's an invoice declaration only. So every country is in a bit of a learning curve, I think, at the moment. But you're not alone, and this is why the Chamber is here to help you. So I think we've had quite a few questions, Malin, have we? My colleague Malin has hopefully been answering some of the questions.
We did. I'm just answering quite a lot of them in writing.
Fantastic.
I've got one for you about Carne, and I'm not sure, it's coming from James. Why doesn't the Carne cover the goods while they cross the European Union? I don't know if I understand this very well, James.
The Carne does cover the goods, but you would have to have, as we said, if they're crossing, say, to Turkey, if they're going to a country, that is not in the EU and they're transiting through the EU, you would have to have transit vouchers. If you are sending goods to the EU and then going to another country that's not in the EU, that would be 2 visits. So you have a visitation for every country you're visiting that's in the Carne scheme. But if you're transiting other countries, you have to have transit vouchers. And if you do not have transit vouchers, then that country won't let you go through without the normal formalities, really. So you can transit the EU, you are covered on your Carne, but only if you have transit vouchers in your Carne to do so. And also, if you are visiting the EU, unless you have the EU as a visited country on your Carne, then they won't accept it as well. So you need to have actually stipulated that when you are visiting the EU as well. So when you actually apply for the Carne, you'll be asked what countries you want to visit. And, you know, for example, we do a lot of Carnes for at the moment maybe the bands, they tour the world. So they send all their equipment on a Carne. And those Carnes, they might be doing 10 destinations, 10 different country destinations. So that one Carne, as long as the goods are back within the year, or you can apply for an extension, that one Carne will cover all of those visits, as long as you have put that you are visiting that country and you have paid the appropriate guarantee or insurance to visit that country. So that's how a Carne works. But we're happy to help if you have any more questions on that one, James. I know we've had a lot of questions again in relation to preference. And as I said before, we will definitely be assisting you by putting on a webinar in relation to preference and the new origin rules, because this seems to be the area which a lot of companies are having a problem with. And as I said, the agreement with the EU only includes what we call bilateral accumulation. So that when we talk about bilateral accumulation, we are talking goods need to come into the UK. They need to have undergone a process, and that process must be beyond what that agreement stipulates is a minimum process. So we have to, those goods have to have undertaken an additional process in the EU for them to qualify as under preference for the EU trade agreement. So you can use goods, you can use parts from other countries, non-EU countries, but the what we call non-originating, though that must be within the terms of the trade agreement. So some you may need to preference rules may mean they must change tariff heading. They must change tariff code. Some may mean they must undergo two-stage productions. So with regards to the goods coming from the EU, if you're importing goods from the EU and you're doing nothing with them apart from keeping them in stock and then exporting them, say, to another EU country, that is the issue, one of the major issues in relation to the UK-EU trade agreement at this point in time, because if the goods have not undergone a process which is significant enough to meet the origin rule criteria, then those goods will not class as qualifying for preference. Hence, those goods, if they're exported, will be subject to duty and taxes at point of destination. And yet, as you can imagine, that's causing a lot of companies a lot of heartache and headaches at this point in time, because, you know, we have a lot of companies, supply chains are very complicated. We have a lot of companies who are distributors, a lot of e-commerce companies, you know, and they're importing goods and then they're selling them when they get an order from the customer. And as you've probably seen on the news, the customers are getting goods and then they're getting an invoice or a bill for the customs declaration, the duty and the VAT. So this is an area which is of major problems at this point in time for a lot of businesses. But there can be ways around them, and it's just knowing a bit more about the circumstance. Any more, Malin?
I am looking at them. This was a lot of people asked about the preferential origin and how they qualify for that, and you made it. The goods must be processed in United Kingdom. I am looking through them and I'm trying to answer in the same time. People were asking about outward processing, but this is customs procedure, special procedures. I recommend you to look to our other webinars that we already had about special procedures. They're not relating to today's webinar.
Fantastic.
And
okay, yes.
More processing.
There's lots and lots of questions. Malin's answered a lot. So what I would suggest is the ones we haven't covered, we'll come back to you separately on. Malin mentioned inward processing, outward processing. They are the customs special procedures. And if you're importing stuff and you process them, you can send them out without duty and taxes being paid, as long as you are registered to do so. We have done a webinar on customs special procedures, and it is available on the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce website under webinar library. So please have a look at that, because the rules of that haven't changed. So that will cover inward processing, outward processing, temporary customs warehousing and stuff like that. So please have a look at that webinar, because that may answer some of the questions. But for all of you that have questions in regard to the preference agreements and whether your goods conform or not, qualify or not, as I said, it's dependent on, first of all, the origin of the goods. Secondly, the commodity code, the country they're going to, the rules of origin relating to that country, and the accumulation part of the rules of origin, because that is the crux of the matter. And the EU-UK trade agreement only has bilateral accumulation, which means EU parts can be taken into account as a qualifying as long as they're processed in the UK, and vice versa. What they don't have in the UK-EU trade agreement is what they call diagonal accumulation, where you can get parts from, say, Turkey, and then include that as well. That is not included in the EU trade agreement. So anything going to the EU from the UK, if you're wanting to have diagonal accumulation, then it's not an automatic thing. So any goods coming from Turkey would be classed as non-originating. So you would have to follow the rule relating to non-originating goods for that particular product. So rules of origin are a complicated thing, and it is the crux, and every expert in the field that we know and we work with and everything, this is the main thing that is coming up, is relating to rules of origin and whether goods comply for preference or not. And so we're here to help, and that's why we're here. So I think we did cover a lot of the pre-questions in the webinar. So thank you for that, Malin.
Yes, can I ask you, somebody's asking how to apply for an ATA Carne and how long the application process take? Okay,
well, that's an easy one. Our office at Heathrow do ATA Carnes, so we're at Chambers of Commerce, issue ATA Carnes. The process is quite easy. You could contact the club, they'll explain the process to you. We have an electronic platform where you can apply it electronically for them, and then they're normally processed, as long as everything's correct and in place, they're normally processed the same day. So, but there has to be guarantees and insurances paid, etc., etc. So the process is quite simple, and what we'll do is we'll let you know the contact details of how to apply for them. But we have a dedicated team who work on Carnes here at Thames Valley Chamber. Thank you, Malin. So I think what I'm going to do is draw today to a close, but I just want to remind you that we're here to help, and if you have any questions, please let us know. Any other questions? But I want to remind you again of the additional support initiative that we have for Berkshire companies. As I said, it's a new collaboration between the Thames Valley Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the Thames Valley Berkshire Business Growth Hub. And this is an initiative designed to provide advice on EU exit to help SMEs understand and adjust to the changes. And that is companies in Berkshire. So we will advise other organisations. However, under this scheme, you will get free one-to-one advisory sessions delivered by us at the Chamber of Commerce, if it's relating to trade, exporting or importing goods and services, or the Berkshire Growth Hub, relating to other aspects of EU exit, whether that be people, compliance, regulate that, anything, other aspects of EU exit, the Berkshire Growth Hub. So you can visit the Are You EU Ready website. We have a dedicated number and also a dedicated email. So if you visit that website, you also get the number of the Growth Hub. So that's just something to remind for any company in Berkshire. We have this free initiative, and that is one-to-one advisory sessions are available for you. So please do register to contact us to take advantage of those. So as I mentioned before, we will get back to you if your question has not been answered. And I know Malin's been answering a lot of them while he's been in the background. But I'd like to thank you for joining the webinar today. And as I said before, don't hesitate to contact us if you need any help. Thank you very much.